What's up, my intrepid students? We are here with another part of this ESBuild boiler series that I'm making, where I'm going to show y'all some additional configurations we could do for production, which thankfully there's really not a whole lot to do, as ESBuild's API, especially its JavaScript API, is super simple. This should be part 3 in this series, so if you're interested in figuring out where the heck I'm even already here and you're stumbling in this video first, I'd recommend going and checking the other parts. They're part of this playlist. You can just Google or search the name on our Covalence channel, which you should subscribe and like, comment, blah, 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 all that fun YouTube stuff. Or just check for links in the description down below. And if you're interested in learning more about how to build servers, like web REST APIs, React client sides, in-depth React content, then for $25 a month, you can join our community membership, which will also be a link in the description down below. You'll get access to our front end, our back end, and my standalone React course, and I'm currently in the works on a standalone TypeScript and database course if you have any interest in those. So consider joining up and get involved in the community and be able to harass me in Discord. Otherwise, enjoy this video. So, we had left off talking about some basics of production optimization. I think our server had about all of it. Yeah, we had this check right here for serving this as the static middleware or not, which we'll have to add a couple of additional things to prepare for production bundling, right? So ultimately, in our client-side development, we have a server, 2 servers running. I mean, I could actually draw this, couldn't I? Hold on. Hold on, then. Yeah. Let's see here. This is going to be terrible drawing, so wish me luck. We have 2 actual servers running in our development process. So in development, I actually have my Express server running on port 3000. I'll write 3K. And then I believe I have on port 8080 or 8000 my client side running on a ESBuild like mini server, which serves... Oh, this is terrible drawing. Our React website, right? So this is the ESB server. That's terrible. Okay, but the point is here, visually, you can see we have our Express server, which is our API, running over here in our dev script. And then we have isolated over here another separate server that is serving our React website in development. And we're doing this so we could have nice hot reloading. I'm not writing this. Oh my God. Hot reloading available right here on our development setup, because it's nice to have our React website simply refresh itself every single time we make changes to it. It just speeds the development process and makes our life easy peasy. But in production, that's not going to be the setup we're going to have. In production, we should have a singular Express server running on a port assigned to us in whatever that production port may be, right? So some production port value that will be assigned to us, so we don't know what it's going to be. Our Express server is going to run, and our Express server will not only be the API that our website's going to be making requests to, it's also going to be responsible for serving those static files that build our React website. That's what has to happen here, right? So our production server will be running straight up. That's it. It'll be both the API and the responsibility for serving the React website. So clearly in our production bundle, we're going to have to account for this in our code, which will make this entry point for our server a little bit more complicated, but ultimately not that bad. So, hold on, my cat's crying. Percy, you want to come say hi? Percy. Everyone loves a cat in a YouTube video, right? All right, if he comes by, that'd be awesome. But if not, oh well. So we have this going on, and that's hopefully that diagram got straight in y'all's heads for anyone that's not like very versed in development, production, and stuff like that, that you have some ideas of how this is ultimately going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just build our new configurations. Like, it's nice. There's going to be a lot of overlap you're going to notice in our skill set and what we're learning here with ESBuild. Again, the majority, the core of this series, something I discovered recently, and I fell in love with it so much, I wanted to make a YouTube playlist about it. We're going to see a lot of overlap in our properties, but it's nice to have the separation of concern between production bundling and development bundling examples, is because, like, I don't want to have a ton of separate conditionals all over the place in my configuration files, and I'd rather have more files that, again, have specific separations of concern. Meaning I'm going to go ahead and make a client.prod.mjs, if you want to call that, for production, for example. And this is where I'm going to write all my production level code. And I could probably just copy my development setup and just change a few booleans and add or remove a few properties, and we are good to go. For example, I don't need it to watch files in production like I do in development because, well, I'm not changing my source code, so there's nothing new to compile and bundle, right? It's just one output and you're good to go. As well as I don't need to serve the static files from my client anymore because we're going to let the server we've built fall back to be that instead, in which we're going to have to go add some code there, like I said. So again, there's going to be a lot of overlap in the properties here, but ultimately it's nice to have them separated. So as we begin to specialize more and more, if you take this boiler and actually build an app with it, please share it in the comments down below, or again, be a part of our community and just link it to me in Discord. I would love to see what you guys can take and run with this and all the additional properties or values that you might discover along the way to optimize both development and production bundling with ESBuild. Again, I'll be messing with it myself, so maybe there'll be a continuation in the future of things I learn. I wore my beanie today, even though it's super hot outside, because I didn't want to put product in my hair. So, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a hat in this video, not the rest. I actually meant to take it off beforehand, just let my hair flop around, but I guess I forgot before I hit the record button, so we're rolling with it, folks. Righto, so just like in our other one, we're going to have to import and use our ESBuild installation. I'll be using Sass as well to just shut up those errors that we had to learn about in a previous video as well. Oops, I forgot the as keyword here. We're going to say import our Sass plugin because, again, we're using Bootstrap, and if you're trying to remember from the previous videos why I chose Bootstrap, it's because it's what we teach in our course, our full stack course, which is, again, broken up into front end and back end. Students use it in several other labs and projects. A lot of my demo videos use it because it's just simple and easy to learn how to build mobile responsive and somewhat decent looking websites with it. And in this video, depending on how long it is, I may remove it and switch to Tailwind in development and production just to see how we can do that. So like before, I'm going to simply run a try catch. I want to make sure I console.error, an error occurred, is it 2 R's, 2 C's? That sounds right. During bundling, and then I'll log the error, right? Like I just want to have some level of logging of this error so I know what's going on, and we want to do a graceful shutdown. Remember, our bundling happening here is via a node script, so we have access to the process, the node.js process object that has all these properties and functions on it, right? So we have access to it. Now, just like before, this is going to be asynchronous in nature, so I'm going to tell ESBuild to not make a context that can watch and serve and stuff like that, but we're going to be running the ESBuild build function and passing it our configuration object because this is straight building our production bundle, and it's calling it a day. So we need to provide the same thing from before, the entry points, an array of possible entry points of this project, which in our case will just be the index TSX, the server of the source client code. Again, this is very, very similar. Bundle, we are indeed bundling. What we don't need, however, is a source map, so we're going to turn that one off to false. Again, those tooltips get in my way when I'm typing. So our source map is false. I actually care about minifying in this case. We're going to say minify true. Our out file will be the same, where it'll be a public static bundle.js output to replace the one we've been messing around with in development. From there, I need to probably also define a environment variable of some kind. I'm going to just manually override whatever node env happens to be and define it myself. Again, unless you did a JSON stringify, the double quote, single quote is what needs to happen for us to actually recognize production as a string inside of our code. So there we go. I'm going to strictly just define this environment as production, which means theoretically I could come over yonder, and I know we had it to trigger in this script, but thinking about it, we actually, unless we have like multiple staging stages of this whole process, I'm probably going to have just a development and a production setting in terms of something simple. So thinking about back in our client development that we did in the last 2 videos, we can come into this define property and just set this to development. It just makes more sense that way to me looking back. I don't know why I need to toggle it one way or the other. back with our ternary that we had. But, you know, if you have multiple stages, then this might still be something you want to do, where you have like a development, a staging, and a production environment that you're messing with. So in this case, maybe you do need this kind of ternary depending on what stage you're in. But for our development cycle that we're using in this video and keeping it simple in this series, we either got development or we have production. There's really nothing in between in our case. So we can keep this simple and just define it as production now. So I could have certain if statements, fire or not fire. So for example, in our client, I believe index TSX, if the environment is development, I add this event source. If it's production, which will be in our production bundle, this change event should not be added, and that's exactly what's going to happen because of this define environment variable right here, not defaulting to production. From there, I need to add my same plugins as well. And with our Sass plugin, I'm going to call it and pass in a couple of things and say, hey, you are going to be injecting a style tag into the head of the HTML, just like before. I want to shut up any of your deprecated dependencies, and I want your logger level to be into shut up mode, because I know there's currently that error with Bootstrap Sass using some kind of deprecated percentage value and blah, 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 blah. I'm just having it to shut up. I don't care unless I have just like a major error and not like a deprecated warning or something like that. So there we go. Just some easy stuff right here. And we might as well give ourselves a quick little console log saying client bundled successfully for production, exclamation point, because we're excited and happy that ended up working. So there we go. There is our client prod MJS ready to go. I dig it. Looks pretty good to me. So from here, we need to do the same thing for our server. And again, there's going to be some easy stuff to just copy and paste, but I'm going to write it by hand since this is kind of fun. We're going to write ESBuild from ESBuild in our client or our server side. We're going to write our try catch block, which I will just copy and paste here. So undo and paste. There we go. Okay, from here, we are going to do the same thing. I'll tell await ESBuild.build. No context we have to build here to do some auto-watching or serving or anything like that. So just build out our thing. The entry points will be an array of possible files. In our case, it'll be everything linked into our server.ts file. Bundle true. Source map false. Minify. I mean, we might as well. We don't need to. I don't need to minify server-side code as importantly. We might as well go ahead and do that for I guess, speed to run our node script on our server. We are going to specify our platform as a string value of node. Again, that tooltip with my mouse is appearing in places I do not want today, just like in the previous video where I kept complaining about it. Target, it's always a good idea to set what version of node we're using, or like what, you know, what version of node we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and just set our target as 18.6, since that's what I've been developing this on, and I know that's where it works. So I'll just define or tell my this process that's the target environment we're going for here. Just like in the other one, we're going to make sure to do a process.env and manual override of this environment variable to make sure it has the value of production that I want. So there we go. There's our defined out variable. And our out file will be just like in our previous, in our clients, or in our development ESBuild configuration file. Just output to dist server.js. Then we'll have a console log that says server bundled successfully for production, exclamation point, because we're happy. There we go. Cool. So we have our two production scripts ready to go to bundle, minify, and no source map is basically the bare minimum these have to do to successfully build what they're going to build, right? And we also have obviously the Sass plugin for client side, where we don't need a plugin like that for server side at the moment. So here we go. Those two are now done, and what I need to do is actually add them as additional scripts in our package JSON. Let's go ahead and do that here together. I only have these ones for watching the client, the server, restarting the server with nodemon, and then running a dev script to run them in parallel. So these things just run in together, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a similar trick that we learned about in the previous videos about these watch : asterisks being able to run several commands at once. And we're going to actually utilize a very similar trick in this process here. I'm going to say I need a build client that's going to run node esbuild-config /client.prod.mjs file. It's going to run node on that. Same for this. It's going to simply be build server node ESBuild config server.prod.mjs. So now we reference the appropriate production bundling settings we want for building our project and not just watching it, right? So this is what's going to have to run when we deploy our project somewhere. Now, rather than having to tell or write some kind of workflow for our chosen deployment strategy, whether that's Heroku or Fly or Render or something like that. I don't know if we can deploy a full Express server to Vercel. I need to check their documentation because I know, Vercel originally, what was it called? It was like now.sh or something like that before it changed or rebranded. It used to be only for like deploying Next.js sites and eventually became like a general deployment strategy. And, even though Next.js runs a server and stuff like that, it's not meant to have like an ever running server deploy to it, which is what this is going to be. So I don't know if we could do that there, but I do know this will work on Fly, Heroku, Render without too much issue. So to run the two of these scripts, I don't want them to run in parallel like I did with our dev scripts, because we're going to add two more scripts. I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. Unlike our dev script, which runs everything in parallel, meaning at the same time, I don't want them running these two scripts in parallel, because if there's any kind of problems or error logging, I want to know where it happened, because the logs might get intermingled between these two running at the same time. So there's a new flag we can pass to our good friend npm run all, which is -- sequential. I can spell sequential, and that means it'll mean run one after the other and not parallel at the same time, right? So it says run one, then run the other. So if something happens in client, it'll log that error with the client script running first sequentially, and then this next sequential one will be server, which will then log its own error if a problem happened there. So that's going to be our npm run build script is going to do. And then finally, most of these deployment strategies need to have some kind of start script. How do I know how to start your project? It will default to try and find this in your scripts in your package JSON, which will simply be run node on disk server.js. You can make the argument that this doesn't include the building process, so you'd have to make sure that everything is built and ready to go before the script actually runs, which we can define during our deployment process, wherever that happens to be, or you can choose to do it here as well. There's like a pre-start, or say like, hey, run npm run build before this thing runs or something like that. But we're going to make the assumption this is ready to go. By the time we have to run npm run start, everything is built and set. So there we go. That right there is the list of scripts we need. We have the configurations, and we have some minor things to talk about and to look into. The majority of it is actually on our server here, as simple as it is. And obviously, you're going to want something like this. We're going to be assigned 99 times out of 100, some kind of port number that I'm going to default to 3000 if not provided, like that. Server, oh my god, this tooltip's in the way today. Running on port and then port. Whoops, I need to do template literals. I'm going to do interpolation. There we go. Case sensitive, folks. Okay, so there we go. We now have our app listening on a particular port. So if we're assigned one during our deployment, we will receive it. Otherwise, we simply default to 3000 and call it a day. So there we go. Now, these are going to be all our API routes is represented by this app.get. In realistic fashion, you probably have something like this, right? Where you'd have like a function you're calling, or if it's just like an object you're passing in, there's a collection of stacked routes, as well as like any kind of API prefix you'd want on your API. Doesn't really matter what it is. You might even set up some kind of like environment variable for it. So like in process.API prefix or something like that, where you can have like a prefix from environment variables that it's different between dev and prod. So you might have like /dev in development and /v1 in production, so you know what's going on. But again, this little app.get represents all of our future API routes, no matter what they are, and they're specific. They have a method, they have a path that's going to get matched, even if it's split amongst a bunch of different files and folders. Again, if you want to know how that works, we do have a backend course and our community membership that goes over that in great detail. So that's what's going to happen here, and I need to make sure that this is not lost, but I do have something new I have to worry about. Remember, our server that is serving our client in development has this written inside of it. A server that has a fallback in case there's any client-side routing. Remember, any request that we any URL that we type into our browser and hit enter is interpreted as a GET request to a web server. If our server is not told, hey, if it starts with API, that's probably a server-side route, and you're going to get that request and send a response as you're coded to do so. If, for example, it is not one of those GET requests, not going to our thing, we have to tell our code that, hey, this might be a request to a route on the website, not a route on the server. So I need to tell my website, hey, or the server, hey, let the website be the fallback for these kinds of 404 problems. So if the server is like, well, this don't look like an API request. Maybe it's a route to the front end or something like that. I don't know why it's Southern. Let's send it over on to back to the browser, the index HTML. Maybe some code over there will handle the 404 problem, or maybe it's just a page, right? So that would be like our user going to localhost 3000. All right, forget the localhost part. That sometimes confuses students. myapp.com/API/hello should respond with a message of world. That is the expected result of that request, right? What if I go to myapp.com/about? That would, to us as users, if I went to that URL and hit enter my URL bar, again, that is a GET request looking for the following. It is interpreted as looking for this route, right? And it would then do something, obviously. It would have to, right? It would have to do something. But that's not what's going to happen. Clearly, this is a route to our single-page application website using React and some kind of React routing, whether it's TanStack router or React Router DOM. That's clearly going to be a request to our front end that should have an index.html, injected style tag for all of our style, and our React bundle.js that's found in the static folder, for example, right? That should be all that's served on /about, which would load probably some about element or profile page or our company's about information page as a front-end client-side route. That is what I'm trying to make y'all think about and distinguish here, and why we have to account for this, because we had it written into our, like I said, our development fallback right here. We have to write the equivalent for production over here. So I'm going to be writing a test for is development and is production more than once across this this code here. So I'm going to go ahead and just make an is production variable that is a call to process.env.node.env if it equals to production, or if we're going to have one for development, which will be the following. Because I'm going to use it in a couple different places, I might as well go ahead and prepare to do it that way, like that, right? So there we go. I have two variables set up to handle this process now. I like doing this way, but if you just like your inline if statements, that's totally fine as well. So that's what we talked about in the previous video. This doesn't need to be here in development because the server in development is not going to be responsible for serving our website. But honestly, like, that's not that big of an optimization issue. But again, it does tell other developers that we are only serving our public folder in production and not in development. Oops. Which means I can now take this variable and just place it down here for some simplicity, and I only have ran this check once instead of multiple times. I mean, we can make the exact same argument for cores. In development, my site, again, my site runs on port 8000 something, right? That's that origin for the client React website. And then my server runs on port 3000 by default, which is that origin. These are considered not the same origin, obviously, which means any request from the browser to a server on different origins is a cross origin. That is a horrible C. That looks like oops. That's a C. Can I erase it? Does it erase the whole thing? It does. This is a cross origin resource share, which is why we need this middleware enabled. But remember, that's what happens in our development process. But in our production process, the website is sent by the Express server, React website client, right, whatever, that's, let's say, on port 3000. They're now on the same origin, myapp.com, or localhost:3000. If they're on the same origin, then CORS is no longer required. So we have a couple different ways to handle this. We can simply tell CORS to, in production, only allow from a particular domain, otherwise just be default enabled for all domains in development, so we can always just change domains in development and add new ports and things like that and not matter. Or we can just say that, it's only really needed in development. So I can say if is development, do I add my CORS features here? This is tight, simple, it's nice, it's simple. You could always do something more complicated where you might consider writing some kind of ability to write some CORS get options. You might see this online sometimes. I can't say one is better than the other, so I could do something even as simple as this, like const CORS options equals is development. If it's development, then I can say undefined, which will force CORS to just allow all cross-origin resource shares in development mode only. And then I can say that I will only allow some kind of environment variable again, where I can say it would be, I guess, prod URL or prod base URL, whatever you want to call it. It'd be like API base URL, like some kind of environment variable that specifies. I guess we should call this like get CORS options is a better name because that's technically what it's doing. So rather than having to, what's it complaining about? Ooh, that's interesting that it doesn't know what it is. Oh, because I don't invoke the function. That's right, because it's going to get invoked. Okay, there we go. When it passes through that middleware. Because I'm not invoking get CORS options. That's not a function, right? Get CORS options is not a function. The CORS part is the function. My bad. I'm passing it an object of parameters. My mistake, y'all. So this is now going to say that this origin is only going to be the one that's allowed to make requests to our website. So in development, undefined means that this will then just be a vanilla call to CORS. It'll default and allow everyone, all cross origins in the browser, to make requests to this server. That way, whatever other client websites we might be running off to this server, they can now communicate with it with no issue. In production, we can specify a specific origin, like myapp.com, as the only allowable cross-origin resource share in case we have to worry about that. So whether one is better than the other, I kind of like this one because it's simpler for newbies to understand and it's kind of easier to get your head of. This is the more advanced option that you'd probably want to consider in case you have new clients popping in from different places that might talk to this server. But given that this is a coupled monorepo where it's going to have a website served by the server and that's it, they're coupled together, I don't really care to have CORS enabled if I don't need it. So I'm going to remove CORS, only add CORS if it's development, otherwise I don't care. Now, something else we have to take into consideration is not just our static folder, but like I said, that 404 fallbacking. That has to happen after our API routes, because in Express, methods and paths are matched in order of importance or specificity from top to bottom. So you might be inclined, and I've seen students do this because, again, ChatGPT isn't the best, it tends to recommend to try and include it inside of here to have your 404 error handling fallback to say, hey, if it's not matched by the server, that must be a client-side route and let it happen there. This is not going to work. You have to include it below all of your individual API routes. So we're going to say if is production, we need to add a 404 route catcher that looks like this, where I will have the request and the response, and I will send a response send file that will be our index.html fallback. And we should include probably, this should work. Root, I think, and we just provide root public. So like root would be serves files relative to path public in the root of our project, and it will send the index.html file outside of that. We can always do like a path.join as well as something else we can consider doing if this doesn't work. But I'm pretty sure those are the args I can pass to a send file, path string, option, send file, root. I remember what it said for root. Sends files relative to path, root of the project, public. Okay, so yeah, that should be fine. That should work out. So in production, this is our 404 fallback for client-side routing. And again, it must be below all of our respective API routes. So they get matched first, but if none of them get matched, then this catcher will say, okay, just serve the website back instead of Express sending an error saying, hey, I don't know that API path. Just go, this might be a client-side route. Send the client to it, right? Send the client to it. and just see if there's a client-side path that matches that, like /FAQ, /about, /contact, or something like that. So there you go. That's something you have to take into consideration for this additional step we're doing here. But yeah, I believe that's all the changes we do need to make to actually build and send this and run this to see if it actually works. So what I want to do is confirm by nuking our source map as well as our server.js. I'm going to destroy this as well because I don't care. And what I want to do now is run my build script to see if it correctly works or if I forgot something or I have a typo somewhere in this process, which is quite possibly true. So I'm going to say npm run build. It should run them sequentially. So it's going to say sequential. Start with the first client. Oh, we do have a problem. Build failed with one error, could not resolve. So typos, gotta love them. Okay, little mistake right there, folks. No big deal. A little typo inside of our build configuration in our server. Where is it? There it is. If y'all get in the comments if you saw it earlier, I know it's typo city here. What are you gonna do, man? We're all but human, right? Let's try that again. Build this stuff out, please. I don't know why it flashed the size of the window there. Because I made this too big. There we go. I did it again. What happened? What happened? Could not resolve source server. Server.ts. What's the problem here? It looks like I included an additional. Yeah, okay. This makes it a relative path. I need to tell it just to look in the root of the project. Dope. Double typo, y'all. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm busy rambling about the first typo I found, there's another one that I just didn't notice, which is fun. So let's try that again. Client bundled successfully, server bundled successfully. Now I just misclicked Postman and opened it by mistake, so let's close that out because getting all frazzled from two typos back to back, Luke. It built our server.js. I don't see a source map. It should be minified. Oh boy, that's nasty to look at. Same thing with our public static. It built the bundle, no source map. So we know our configuration for production is running successfully here. So our build script is done. And now if we need to start our project to test it in develop or production, it would be running npm run start on our project. It should start up our server running on port 3000. If I go to now my website, it should be our project available to ourselves right here. And there you go. This is our website. Now, I can't zoom in on the bar here. I apologize. But if I type in /about, notice what happens. If I type in /about, it sends the website going, okay, maybe this is a client-side route. I'm going to let the client handle it with its library and what it's doing. But if it's an API route, such as API/hello, it should go ahead and respond with this right here, our expected value from our API, the actual response. And you can always customize it to where if it starts with the prefix, the prefix API, that it will have a custom 404 handler for the API routes. If it doesn't start with API, it will do the traditional fallback. So there's a couple different ways we can set that up, which is a bit more advanced than this video needs to be, which is already kind of complex. But there we go. We have a, ready to deploy version of this particular project. It's only been 30 minutes. I got time. I know Tailwind is immensely popular. I tell my students to look into it, and I want to show y'all how easy it is to possibly go ahead and add it. It'll only be some client-side changes. So, yeah, and then you know what? Maybe I'll just deploy this a couple random places to show y'all how it works, right? Because that's another thing that even though theoretically this is enough, this is all you need to get deploying without too much issue. Most deployment platforms, especially like Heroku and things like that, will automatically detect and look for build scripts and start scripts with additional help from like a proc file in Heroku's case. Really simple to get up and running, but I might choose to deploy this in this series just so I can see how easily an ESBuild project can be deployed somewhere and see how it works. So yeah. All right. So if you were interested to add Tailwind, this was like production. I like how I'm talking out loud to y'all like this is like a classroom and you're listening. Yeah, I'm going to leave this video as is. I think this was good to separations of concern, right? I think it was good enough in this video to show the production changes we can make to get ready, which honestly, we could talk about the client. Anyway, let's do it. This is going to be about production bundling only. In the next video, I'll show y'all how to replace Bootstrap with Sass Bootstrap with Post CSS Tailwind and add a plugin to it to show y'all how easy it is to do so with ESBuild. And then in subsequent videos, I'm going to deploy this to a couple random places and see how hard it is. So, something else we need to take into consideration is the same thing we talked about on the server. Remember, our app TSX currently makes a request to localhost 3000. This was fine in both development and production because we had our cores options available, and that allowed us to do this. This base URL is now the same place it's going to be deploying to in our npm run start test, but in actual production environments, meaning when we actually have a domain like myapp.herokuapp.com or wherever the fly render is, or the fly or render domains point to, this domain name of localhost 3000 ain't gonna fly in the real world. So we could consider making into a very, 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 very rudimentary service file or something like that, or I guess all this service is. In the real world, you probably have several. I might have one called fetchservice.ts that just simply runs the following: base URL equals process.env.node.env. If it's development, if it is development, it could say we need to have it talk to our server. Remember, in development, React runs on 8080, I believe, or 8004, some crap like that. In development, we need the base URL to automatically look for and be localhost 3000. But in production, it will be relative to our server wherever it's deployed. So if I write fetch/API/hello, the default base URL will be what it needs to be. So whether that is our Heroku, Fly, or Render domain /API/hello, or our localhost 3000 domain, right? So this makes it so in development, we talk to where our server's deployed. Otherwise, just use the base URL by default. And that's what this base URL values, and that is what it can do for us. So out of some laziness, we could do like the following: export const fetch data, and we can use some async await inside of here. I can call this whatever endpoint string we have coming up, for example. That's what our endpoint's going to be. And if this is going to be like a get request, we could pass in like a body and method and things like that. But we can just assume this will be like a get request for now. Again, this is supposed to be a simple example, not something you're actually going to use. You're going to code something out a bit more robust than this, or console.error. And we're going to do a fetch error and our error. So again, like this is just, and that way in our component, we can handle the UI somehow if we need to. So this isn't going to be the most robust fetch service or fetch data we're going to talk about. I'm just showing you something rudimentary to drive this point home right here is all I want to do. So I'm going to say const response or res or whatever is an await to fetch. And here's where the magic happens. Our base URL, should one need to be applied, which it would in development. Otherwise, just be our endpoint after that, which would be our relative URL in production. So there we go. That's all that really needs to happen down yonder, right? So we can say even a simple if res dot is not okay, then we're going to throw a new error like this. And the error message could be error and our response, the response.status text or something like that. That way we have some log help happening here. Otherwise, const data equals await response.json, which is a promise, and then return our data once she's all said and done, or throw an error should it happen to happen. So over here in our app, I can now import and use my handy dandy function from up1, just kidding, same directory, services, fetch service, bring in my fetch data function now, and this will not scale across my whole application, but this will. So now I can say fetch data to our endpoint of /API/hello. Again, with no base URL in front, it will default to using whatever our root domain or is, aka our Heroku, Fly, or Render domain that we are assigned, or whatever our CNET points to, like if we buy a domain for ourselves, like myapp.com/API/hello. In development, it'll now do localhost:3000/API/hello, and that's a cross-origin request, which is accounted for by our server. But now it's going to make that request. It's going to do an internal error handler, which will then let me have our data returned to us, where I can, once again, simply call it like this and call it a day. If there's an error, I'm already logging the error. Stop it, keyboard. I'm already logging the error from the fetch service file, so you don't have to log the error again. This is going to be my way of logging all fetch data errors. So here, instead of doing something with the error, we could have it do like if I had the navigation library, I could have it do like navigation.navigate or whatever the heck it was called, like that, like go to a login page or an error page or something like that. I can navigate to that particular place, or I could set something on the UI, like I can set an error handler. I can set some kind of error handling state to display a state message or something like that. So you can do whatever you want here, right? So it could be like set error as true is what you could call it, and then when I'm console logging it because I don't have it here, but you can have some error display in case something goes wrong. Like here's where you can actually focus on how the error affects the UI. Reroute or redirect to somewhere else, set some kind of error alert to appear as true, fire a modal, fire a toast with an error that occurred or something like that, because we already logged it from here, right? So fire a modal, fire a toast, set some kind of error alert to appear, whatever have you, because the error handling is handled over here. This is what it means to the UI. This would mean what it means to us as developers and the backend, etc. So that's something to consider there for additional production level stuff. So let's go ahead and test it here. I'm going to go ahead and stop everything. We're going to run npm run build again. Okay, everything's bundled successfully. Start it. There we go. Refresh it, and nothing's broken. It still does hello world without any issue whatsoever. /about still has this redirect. Localhost 3000 still works just fine. Now, if I happen to go back to npm run dev, we got to make sure that I didn't break anything in development, because remember, we have our server at 3000, our website at 8000. So if I go to :8000 now, we had a problem here. What happened, folks? Oh, I know what happened. That right there is fine, but I didn't set it here, did I? Yeah, that's what happened. So what happened here, y'all, is that I did not set in my development server configuration, I did not define the node environment variable, which means my server did not recognize it's in development, which means it didn't add cores, which means I got a cores error right here. So let's go configure that, change it, and restart it, and make sure it works the way we expect. So I'm going to grab the define from the client development configuration file, paste it into the development file for the server. There we go. Bada bing, bada boom. Did I have packages external in my production? Because I probably should. Yeah, I probably should. So there we go. Let's try that again, folks, because I don't want to package all of my node modules in my server, which is something I might have been seeing there a moment ago. But that notwithstanding, let's try that again. I'm going to restart my server with my new build configs. There's all that again. Website on 8000. Try again. And we're good to go. Back over to here. Let's stop it. npm run build. Confirm I didn't break anything by changing that externals. Our server bundle just fine. We're going to go back to 3000 now, and oh, I didn't start it. That's why. Man, I am full of blunders today, y'all. But you know what? It's part of learning. It's part of the fun. No one does things right the first time. Yeah, there we go. And we're good to go. So yeah, I didn't break anything between development and production. I had to do a quick little fix there with our environment variables. Classic little mix-up we all make. And we now have a very rudimentary fetch service. You can set it up with Axios, whatever preferred library you use, or write a more robust fetch service that can handle things other than GET requests, like post, put, and deletes, which your API probably will have endpoints for that in an actual project. So yeah, in the next video, we're going to talk about taking out Bootstrap and putting in Tailwind, the configurations Tailwind's going to need, the plugins our ESBuild is going to need, and we're going to add a plugin to Tailwind to prove that it all works just fine and restyle our front end a little bit. And then I'm going to take this project and deploy it to a couple of places so y'all can try and build some portfolio projects off of this, learn with it, have fun, and write a little post about what you learned from it on your LinkedIn or something like that, or your portfolio site or your resume. I don't know. Yeah, that'll about wrap it up this video. I'll see y'all in the next one for some Tailwind action finally. So yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Check out the description down below for links to the playlist, our community membership, and all that kind of fun stuff. And otherwise, see y'all in the next video.